I took a few days off to go camping in the woods. I set up camp at the end of a 4-hour trail, in a forest a few hours from my town. On the second day, I noticed a narrow path leading out from my campsite. It wasn't on the map, but I decided to follow it, hoping it might lead to something interesting like a pond or a waterfall. I packed some food and water, just in case. As I walked, it was clear the trail hadn't been used in years. It was overgrown and there were no signs of people. After about 2 hours of walking, I reached the end of the trail and found an old, abandoned cabin. Moss and vines covered the walls, and the doors and windows were open. The place looked deserted. I checked my surroundings before approaching the cabin. The woods were eerily quiet. I poked my head inside and saw a dusty, empty hallway. The place smelled of mildew and rotting wood. I walked through a few rooms but found nothing. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed a door with a new silver padlock on it. This was strange because everything else in the cabin was old and decaying. My curiosity was piqued, but an uneasy feeling made me decide not to investigate further. I left the cabin and started back down the trail. As I walked back, I heard footsteps behind me. The trees were dense, making it hard to see anything, but the sound persisted for the entire 2-hour hike back to camp. When I got back, I built a fire and waited, listening and watching for any sign of whoever might have been following me. By nightfall, I hadn't seen anyone, but I continued to hear footsteps in the distance. This went on for hours, with the footsteps coming every 10 to 15 minutes. Eventually, I had to sleep, so I left the campfire burning and went into my tent. I barely slept that night, waking up at every little noise. In the morning, I packed up and left. I'll never know who was following me or what they wanted, and I still wonder what was behind that locked door in the cabin. The whole experience left me feeling uneasy and haunted by the possibilities. This happened almost 10 years ago when I was in high school. My friend, who I'll call Jake, and I haven't talked about it until now because we don't really know what happened. We had wanted to explore this abandoned mall near our city for a while. The only problem was that we didn't have a group to go with. It would just be us, and we knew it was a sketchy place. But we were really curious about it and couldn't stop ourselves. We packed some stuff into a drawstring bag and took Jake's car to get there. The mall was off a long highway, hidden by a lot of trees, probably to keep people from seeing it. The road to the parking lot was destroyed, so we had to park on the side of the highway, hiding the car among some trees so it wouldn't be seen by passing cars. Then we started walking. The sun was setting, giving us just enough light to not get lost in the trees. After a few minutes, the sound of cars faded, and we reached the massive empty parking lot with the abandoned mall in the middle. There were no cars, no people, and no sounds. We stood there for a moment to make sure we were alone, then walked through the parking lot to the main entrance. All the glass doors were shattered, and inside it was immediately darker. We stayed quiet, walking slowly and carefully, just looking around. Being inside this huge, empty mall with no people and no lights was eerie and strange. Every step we took echoed through the dark mall. As we got closer to the middle, we stopped and took our flashlights out of the bag. Then we heard someone laughing. It was from the other end of the mall, which was pitch black. We didn't hear any talking or see any lights. We guessed it was another group exploring the place, but it didn't make me feel any better. We wanted to avoid other people, but we were already there, so we decided not to turn back. We turned on the flashlights and started walking into the dark part of the mall, moving the light around. All the stores were empty with garbage and graffiti everywhere. By then the sun had set because when I looked back, it was pitch black behind us. I turned to tell Jake, but he had stopped walking and was holding his flashlight steady ahead of him. "Jake," I whispered. Then I saw what his light was pointing at. Far back in the store directly ahead of us, there was a figure. They were just standing there, looking at us. What terrified us was how creepy it was for them to just stand there without saying hello or walking away. As more seconds passed, my heart pounded in terror before Jake finally moved his light away. Both of us turned around and started walking quickly back the way we came. We swung our lights around, trying to navigate through the darkness. Our footsteps echoed, making it hard to hear anything else, which only made us more panicked. We finally saw the entrance to the mall, and just then we heard running footsteps from the floor above us. I shined my light and caught a glimpse of someone running down the hallway. Jake and I started sprinting toward the exit as we heard the footsteps coming down the escalators. We got out and ran through the parking lot to the trees. Looking back, no one had followed us. As we walked back to the car, I almost threw up from my heart racing so fast. We got in the car and drove back to Jake's house, and after that we never talked about it. I don't know what that was, but the way it all happened, I can't see how anyone could plan that without meaning harm. Thankfully, we didn't stick around to find out what would have happened if we had stayed. There's an old hotel in my town that's been empty for years. It's changed owners a few times, but each one went bankrupt quickly. Our town is small and old-fashioned, so hardly anyone visits unless they have family here. There's really no need for a big hotel like this one. It's 6 stories high and the biggest building in town. When I was 23, I decided to check it out. I didn't think it was dangerous, just an empty building that might be cool to explore. I went during the day, figuring any people there would also be harmless explorers. I parked at a store half a mile away and walked to the hotel. It stood alone on the side of the road, surrounded by torn-down buildings. The hotel looked worse than I remembered, with crumbling bricks and an overall decaying appearance. I went up to the front and peeked inside. It was mostly empty, with just a few scattered chairs and old furniture. I walked through the lobby and opened the door to the staircase. The stairwell was very dark, with only a dim beam of light from above. It was just enough to see my way up the stairs. When I reached the second floor, the door was blocked and the window covered with wood. I left it and went up to the third floor. The hallway was the creepiest place I'd ever been. It was dark and musty, with only small windows at each end. I went into the first open room, which oddly looked kind of normal. Everything was dusty, but the furniture was arranged like it had never been moved. There were even towels and soap in the bathroom. As I looked around, I heard a thump. I turned toward the doorway, unsure if the noise came from my floor or below. Then I heard quiet footsteps in the hallway. They got closer, and I hoped they weren't on my floor. Suddenly, a door below me opened and slammed shut. Then there was silence. I tried to be quiet as I walked back to the hallway to make sure no one was there. I couldn't see why another explorer would walk straight to a room and slam the door. The silence in my thoughts made me more nervous. After a minute of standing there, I'd had enough. I quietly went back to the staircase. The metal stairs made a hollow thump with each step. As I passed the second floor door, I noticed a gap in it that wasn't there before. Then I looked down the stairs. A figure stood a few steps below, barely visible in the darkness, staring right at me. They looked dreadful and emotionless. I carefully walked on the edge of the stairs, passing them with only a couple of feet between us. Their eyes followed every move I made. Once I reached the bottom, I ran out into the lobby. I hurried back to my car and sat there for a while. Looking back, it was probably the dumbest thing I'd ever done. I didn't realize what I was getting into. I don't know why that person was there or what they were doing, but leaving when I did was the only smart choice I made.